The moment before James Crawford's wrong turn had been ordinary. He had been returning from a business dinner in downtown Nashville, his mind occupied with quarterly reports and expansion plans for his chain of restaurants. The GPS had malfunctioned, and rather than pull over to reset it, he had decided to trust his sense of direction. That decision would prove to be the most important mistake of his life. As his SUV rolled to a stop near the dump entrance, James noticed the small figure sitting in the shadows. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, that perhaps it was just a pile of clothes or a discarded doll. But then the figure moved, and James felt his blood run cold. That was a child sitting there alone in the dark. He stepped out of his vehicle and approached slowly, not wanting to frighten whoever it was. As he got closer, his suspicions were confirmed. A young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, sat huddled on a stained mattress, his eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. The child's clothes were too thin for the weather, and even in the dim light, James could see he was filthy and shaking. "Hey there," James said gently, kneeling down a few feet away from the boy. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" Charlie stared at the stranger, trying to determine if this was another danger or possibly, impossibly, a way out. The man was tall and well-dressed, with kind eyes that reminded him somehow of his father. But Charlie had learned not to trust easily, especially not after tonight. "My name is James Crawford," the man continued in a calm voice. "I'm not going to hurt you. Can you tell me your name? Where are your parents?" The gentleness in the stranger's voice broke something inside Charlie. The tears he had been holding back suddenly poured out, and between sobs, the whole story tumbled from his lips. He told James about his father's death, about Patricia growing meaner every day, about being called a burden and a mistake. He described the car ride here, how Patricia had ordered him out, how she had driven away without a single look back. James listened with growing horror, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. As someone who had built his fortune from nothing, who had experienced his own share of hardship, he thought he had seen the worst of human nature. But abandoning a child at a dump crossed a line he could not fathom. This was not just neglect. This was cruelty of the highest order. "Charlie," James said firmly, once the boy had finished his story, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. What happened to you tonight is not okay. It's not your fault, and you are not a burden. You are a child who deserves to be loved and cared for. I'm going to help you, but first, I need to get you somewhere warm and safe. Will you come with me?" Charlie hesitated. Every adult he had trusted recently had let him down. His father had died and left him. Patricia had thrown him away. Why should this stranger be any different? But as he looked into James's eyes, he saw something he had not seen in months, genuine concern. And what choice did he have anyway? Stay here in the cold and dark, or take a chance on this man's kindness? "Okay," Charlie whispered. James stood and offered his hand. Charlie took it, his small fingers disappearing into the man's warm grip. As they walked toward the SUV, James made a silent promise to himself. He would not let this child down. Whatever it took, however long it required, he would make sure Charlie Bennett knew he mattered, that he was wanted, that he deserved better than a mattress at a dump. The boy climbed into the passenger seat, and James cranked up the heat before buckling him in. As they pulled away from that terrible place, Charlie looked back one last time at the spot where he had Saturday. He was leaving behind more than just trash. He was leaving behind the darkest moment of his young life, though he did not yet know that the man beside him was about to become his greatest blessing. James drove carefully through the Nashville streets, his mind racing through possibilities and priorities. The child beside him had stopped crying but sat silent and still, staring out the window as if in a trance. James knew he needed to handle this situation correctly. There were legal implications, child services to notify, and most immediately, the boy needed food, warmth, and reassurance. "Charlie," James said softly, glancing at the boy. "When was the last time you ate something?" The boy's stomach answered for him, growling loudly in the quiet car. Charlie looked down at his lap, embarrassed. "Yesterday morning, I think. Patricia made me toast, but then she threw it away when I dropped some jelly on the floor. She said I wasted food." James felt anger surge through him again, but kept his voice steady. "Well, that's going to change right now. There's a diner not far from here that stays open late. We're going to get you a proper meal, and then we'll figure out the next steps. Does that sound good? Charlie nodded, a tiny spark of hope lighting his eyes. Food sounded like the most wonderful thing in the world right now. As they drove, James asked gentle questions about Charlie's life, learning about his father's work as a construction supervisor, about the small apartment they had shared, about Charlie's love of drawing and soccer. The boy opened up slowly, his words coming easier as he realized James was genuinely interested. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of Betty's Diner, a local institution known for staying open until midnight and serving the best comfort food in the city. The neon sign buzzed welcomingly, and through the windows, James could see the warm glow of the interior. He helped Charlie out of the car, noticing how the boy winced when he put weight on his left foot. "Did you hurt your ankle?" James asked with concern. "I stepped in a hole at the dump," Charlie admitted. "It hurts a little, but I'm okay." "We'll have a doctor look at that soon," James promised, making a mental note. "But first, food." They entered the diner, and the bell above the door announced their arrival. Betty Thompson, the owner and head waitress, looked up from behind the counter, and her eyes immediately focused on the disheveled child. She was a woman in her late 50s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a bun and a no-nonsense attitude that concealed a deeply caring heart. In her 30 years running this diner, she had seen all types of people in all types of situations, and her instincts told her this was something serious. "Evening, folks," Betty said, approaching them with menus. "Take any booth you like." James guided Charlie to a booth near the back, away from the few other late-night customers. As they slid into the worn vinyl seats, Betty brought over water and studied the boy more closely. His clothes were dirty and torn, he smelled of garbage, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no child should have. "Rough night?" Betty asked James quietly, her eyebrows raised. "You have no idea," James replied, his voice heavy with meaning. "Could you bring us your biggest breakfast special? And maybe some hot chocolate for my young friend here?" Betty nodded, understanding that there was a story here she would learn in time. She headed to the kitchen, calling out the order, and returned moments later with a steaming mug of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. She set it in front of Charlie, who stared at it like it was a precious gift. "Go on, honey," Betty encouraged. "Drink up while it's hot." Charlie wrapped both hands around the mug and took a sip. The sweetness and warmth spread through him, thawing something frozen inside his chest. He had not realized how cold he had been, how numb, until this moment of simple kindness. While they waited for the food, James excused himself and stepped outside to make a phone call. He dialed the non-emergency police line and explained the situation, describing how he had found an abandoned child at the city dump and the story the boy had told him. The dispatcher took down all the information and said an officer would meet them at the hospital within the hour. When James returned to the booth, their food had arrived. Betty had prepared enough to feed 3 people: scrambled eggs, bacon, sausage, pancakes, hash browns, biscuits with gravy, and fresh fruit. Charlie's eyes went wide at the sight of so much food, and he looked up at James as if asking permission. "Eat as much as you want," James encouraged. "There's no rush." Charlie dug in with the desperation of someone who had gone too long without proper nutrition. He tried to pace himself, but his body was demanding fuel. James watched, both glad the boy was eating and heartbroken at the circumstances that had led to this moment. Betty returned with more hot chocolate and a knowing look. "I've seen a lot in my time," Betty said to James in a low voice while Charlie focused on his food. "But abandoning a child, that's lower than low. You found him at the dump." James nodded. "Wrong turn, right timing. I've already called the police. They'll meet us at the hospital." Betty glanced at Charlie, who was now eating more slowly, his initial hunger being satisfied. "That boy's been through hell. What are you planning to do?" "Whatever it takes," James said simply. "He has no one else. His father's dead, his stepmother abandoned him, and apparently, there are no other relatives. I can't just walk away from this." Betty studied James for a long moment, then smiled. A real smile that reached her eyes. "You're good people, Mr. Crawford. I know who you are, you know. Anyone in the restaurant business in Nashville knows your name. You've got the resources to really help this child." "I'm going to try," James said. "Starting right now." Betty reached out and patted his hand. When you bring your bill, it's being taken care of. Consider it my contribution to getting this boy back on his feet. And here, she disappeared into the back office and returned with a cardboard box. We keep donations of clothes and such for folks who need them. There should be something in here that fits him better than what he's wearing. James felt a wave of gratitude. You don't have to do this. Sure I do, Betty said firmly. We all do. That's what community means. You take care of getting him sorted with the authorities, and I'll spread the word. This city takes care of its own, especially its children. Charlie had been listening while eating his pancakes, and he looked up at Betty with tears in his eyes. Thank you, he said in a small voice. Thank you for the food and the chocolate and the clothes. Betty leaned down and gently squeezed his shoulder. You're welcome, sweetheart. And you listen to Mr. Crawford here. He's going to make sure you're okay. After finishing their meal, James helped Charlie sort through the donation box in the diner's restroom. They found a pair of jeans that fit reasonably well, a clean t-shirt, a warm hoodie, and a better pair of sneakers. When Charlie emerged, looking more like a regular kid and less like someone who had been living at a dump, Betty insisted on taking a photo. For the before and after, she explained with a wink. Something to remember how far you've come. As they prepared to leave, several other customers in the diner had become aware of the situation. An elderly man approached and pressed a $20 bill into Charlie's hand. For whatever you need, son, he said gruffly before hurrying back to his booth. A young couple stopped them at the door, and the woman pressed a business card into James's hand. My sister is a child psychologist, the woman said. If he needs someone to talk to, have her call me. No charge. James pocketed the card, overwhelmed by the spontaneous generosity. Charlie was experiencing it too, his eyes wide with wonder at these strangers who cared about him. It was the opposite of being abandoned, being surrounded by people who wanted to help even though they had just met him. As they drove toward the hospital, Charlie turned to James. Why is everyone being so nice to me? James thought about how to answer that question. Because that's what good people do, Charlie. When they see someone who needs help, they step up. You've been dealt some terrible cards lately, but I promise you, there are more good people in this world than bad ones. And we're going to make sure you're surrounded by the good ones from now on. Vanderbilt University Medical Center's emergency room was busy even at this late hour. James checked Charlie in, explaining the situation to the intake nurse, who immediately flagged the case as requiring a social worker and police notification. They were ushered into a private examination room, where a pediatric doctor, Dr. Rachel Kim, came to assess Charlie. Dr. Kim was thorough but gentle, examining Charlie's ankle, which turned out to be sprained but not broken. She checked him for signs of physical abuse and found old bruises on his arms and back, consistent with rough handling. Charlie admitted that Patricia had grabbed him hard sometimes and pushed him when she was angry. Dr. Kim documented everything carefully, her face neutral but her eyes betraying her anger at what this child had endured. While the doctor worked, Detective Susan Morgan arrived. She was a woman in her early 40s with short brown hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She had worked in the Crimes Against Children unit for over a decade and had seen cases that would haunt most people forever. But she had also seen children rescued and given new chances, and that kept her going through the dark days. Mr. Crawford. Detective Morgan approached James in the hallway while Charlie was being x-rayed. I'm Detective Morgan. I understand you found young Charlie Bennett abandoned tonight. James shook her hand and recounted the entire evening, from his wrong turn to discovering Charlie at the dump to their stop at Betty's diner. Detective Morgan took detailed notes, asking specific questions about the location, the condition Charlie was in, and everything the boy had told him about his stepmother. Patricia Bennett, Detective Morgan said, checking her notepad. We'll put out an alert for her immediately. Abandoning a child is a serious crime, and given his age and the circumstances, she's looking at significant charges. Do you know if Charlie has any other family members who could take custody? He told me there's no one, James said. His mother died when he was 2, father died 6 months ago in an accident. Patricia was his father's second wife, and apparently, there are no relatives on either side. Detective Morgan nodded grimly. Then he'll need to go into the foster care system temporarily while we sort this out and build the case against Patricia. A social worker should be here soon to coordinate that. What if I wanted to take temporary custody? James asked suddenly. The question surprised even him, but once he said it out loud, he knew it was what he wanted. I have the resources, the space, and I'm willing to go through whatever background checks and home studies are required. Detective Morgan looked at him thoughtfully. That's generous, Mr. Crawford, but emergency foster placement requires certification and training. It's not something that happens overnight. I understand, James said, but I also know that I have a clean record, significant resources, and a genuine desire to help this child. Surely there must be a way to expedite the process, especially given the circumstances. Before Detective Morgan could respond, a woman in her 30s approached them. She wore professional attire and carried a tablet and briefcase. Mr. Crawford? I'm Carol Rodriguez, the social worker assigned to Charlie's case. I understand you've been with him since you found him tonight. James shook her hand and repeated his offer to foster Charlie temporarily. Carol listened carefully, then consulted her tablet. Under normal circumstances, emergency placement takes time. But given that you're the one who rescued Charlie, that has already bonded with you tonight, and that the alternative is placing him with strangers in an already overstressed foster system, I'm willing to consider it. But we'd need to do an immediate background check, a home visit, and you'd need to sign temporary guardianship papers. Whatever it takes, James said without hesitation. I have a large home in Belmead with several guest rooms. My housekeeper, Eleanor Price, has been with me for 15 years and can provide a character reference. I own Crawford Restaurant Group, so my finances are stable and verified. I'm single, no criminal record, and I've already fallen for that kid in there. Carol smiled slightly. Let me make some calls. The fact that Detective Morgan is already here and can vouch for the situation helps. If everything checks out, we might be able to get emergency temporary custody approved tonight or by morning. As if on cue, Charlie emerged from the X-ray room, his ankle wrapped in a compression bandage and a pair of crutches under his arms. He looked exhausted but alert, his eyes immediately seeking out James. When he saw him, relief flooded his face. Mr. Crawford, Charlie said. What's going to happen to me now? James knelt down to be at eye level with the boy. We're working on making sure you're safe and taken care of. These people, Detective Morgan and Ms. Rodriguez, they're here to help you. And I'm not going anywhere. If you're okay with it, I'd like you to come stay at my house while we figure everything out. Charlie's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. Really? You'd let me stay with you? If you want to, James said gently. You've been through a terrible experience tonight, but you're not alone anymore. A lot of people want to help you, starting with me. Charlie threw his arms around James's neck, and James hugged him back, feeling the boy's thin frame shake with emotion. Over Charlie's shoulder, James saw Carol and Detective Morgan exchange a meaningful look. Sometimes, the system worked exactly as it should, connecting a child in need with someone who genuinely wanted to help. The next morning, after a night spent in a hospital room where Charlie finally got some real sleep, the paperwork was completed. James's background check had come back clean, as expected. Carol had made an emergency home visit at 6 a.m, where she met Eleanor Price, inspected the house, and approved the temporary placement. By 8 o'clock, James was officially Charlie's emergency foster parent, with a court hearing scheduled in 2 weeks to determine the next steps. Eleanor Price had been waiting at James's Belmead home when they arrived. She was a woman in her 60s, with warm brown eyes and the kind of face that invited trust. When James had called her at midnight to explain the situation, she had not hesitated for a moment. She had raised 3 children of her own and had 5 grandchildren, and her heart immediately went out to this little boy who had been so cruelly abandoned. Charlie, Eleanor said, bending down with her hands on her knees to look him in the eye. Welcome to your new home, honey. I've got a room all set up for you, and I made pancakes for breakfast. Are you hungry? Charlie nodded shyly. He was still processing everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. Yesterday at this time, he had been sitting in a cold apartment, hungry and afraid. Now he was standing in a beautiful house with marble floors and high ceilings, being welcomed by people who seemed genuinely happy he was there. James's home was nothing like the cramped apartment Charlie had shared with his father and Patricia. The house in Belmead was spacious and elegant but comfortable, with large windows that let in morning light and rooms that felt lived in rather than just for show. Eleanor led them to the kitchen, where she had indeed made a stack of pancakes along with bacon, eggs, and fresh orange juice. While Charlie ate, James explained the situation more fully to Eleanor. Charlie would be staying with them temporarily while the investigation into Patricia's whereabouts continued and while the family court system determined the best permanent placement. James had already contacted his lawyer to begin the process of formally applying to become Charlie's foster parent or, if possible, to adopt him outright. That's a big decision, Eleanor said carefully, watching James's face. Raising a child is a lifetime commitment, Mr. Crawford. I know, James said. And I've been thinking about it all night. Eleanor, I'm 42 years old. I've built a successful business. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. And I live alone in this big house. What's the point of all of it if I can't use it to help someone who really needs it? When I saw Charlie sitting at that dump last night, something clicked into place. This is what I'm supposed to do. Eleanor smiled and patted his hand. Then we'll do it together. That boy's going to need a lot of love and patience, but I think he's found the right place. After breakfast, Eleanor showed Charlie to his room. It was a large bedroom on the 2nd floor, with windows overlooking the backyard. The bed was already made with fresh sheets, and Eleanor had put out some towels and basic toiletries. There was a desk by the window, a bookshelf waiting to be filled, and a closet that was currently empty. We'll need to get you some clothes and things, Eleanor said. But for now, you just rest. You've had quite a night. Charlie sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the crutches from the hospital. Mrs. Price, he said quietly. Why is everyone being so nice to me? I'm nobody special. Eleanor sat down beside him and put her arm around his thin shoulders. Oh, honey, you listen to me. You are special, very special. You're a brave, strong boy who survived something terrible, and now you're getting a second chance. Mr. Crawford isn't just anybody. He's a man with a big heart who saw someone in need and decided to help. That's what good people do. And I've been working for Mr. Crawford for 15 years, and I can tell you, he's one of the best men I know. Charlie leaned into her hug, soaking in the comfort. Do you think he'll really want to keep me? Or will he get tired of me like Patricia did? Patricia was a cruel woman who didn't deserve to have a wonderful boy like you, Eleanor said firmly. Mr. Crawford is different. When he commits to something, he sees it through. And between you and me, I think you're exactly what he needs to. This house has been too quiet for too long. What would you do if you found an abandoned child? Would you step up like James did? Subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. The first week in James's home was an adjustment for everyone. Charlie was used to being invisible, to staying quiet and out of the way. He would wake up early and try to make himself useful, cleaning his room obsessively, and barely eating unless specifically told to. Eleanor gently corrected these behaviors, assuring him that he was not a burden and did not need to earn his place. James worked from home that week, wanting to be present as Charlie settled in. He showed Charlie the rest of the house, including a game room with a pool table and a home theater. The backyard had a pool covered for the winter and a large lawn where James said they could kick a soccer ball around once Charlie's ankle healed. Charlie absorbed everything with wide eyes, still half convinced he would wake up and find himself back at the dump. Detective Morgan called on the 3rd day with an update. Patricia had been located in Mississippi, attempting to cross into Louisiana. She had been arrested and was being extradited back to Tennessee to face charges of child abandonment, child endangerment, and child abuse. The district attorney was building a strong case, and Patricia would likely face significant prison time. How do you feel about that? James asked Charlie after sharing the news. Charlie thought for a moment. I'm not sad, he admitted. Is that bad? She was mean to me for a long time, especially after Dad died. I kept hoping she would be nice again, like she was when Dad was alive, but she never was. That's not bad at all, James assured him. She hurt you, Charlie. It's okay not to miss someone who hurt you. What she did to you was very wrong, and she's going to face consequences for it. On the 4th day, James took Charlie shopping for clothes, shoes, and other necessities. Charlie was overwhelmed by the stores, by the sheer abundance of choices. He kept gravitating toward the cheapest items, and James had to gently redirect him, explaining that price was not a concern. They filled several shopping bags with clothes, bought new shoes, picked out bedding with a space theme that Charlie loved, and even got school supplies for when Charlie would start attending classes. At one point in the toy store, Charlie stopped in front of a display of art supplies. His eyes lingered on a large set of colored pencils and a sketchbook. James noticed and picked them up without comment, adding them to the cart. Charlie looked up at him with wonder. "You like to draw?" James asked. Charlie nodded. "My dad used to buy me notebooks and pencils. We'd draw together sometimes. He was really good at drawing buildings and things." "Then we should keep that alive," James said. "Your dad would want you to keep drawing." That night, Charlie sat at his new desk and drew his first picture in his new home. It was a simple drawing of the diner, with Betty standing behind the counter smiling. He showed it to James and Eleanor, and they praised it genuinely. Eleanor hung it on the refrigerator with a magnet, just like she used to do with her own children's artwork. The following day, James introduced Charlie to his goddaughter, Amy Fletcher. Amy's parents, Grant and Linda Fletcher, were James's closest friends. They had been worried about his bachelor lifestyle, always setting him up on dates and joking about him needing to settle down. When James called to explain the situation with Charlie, they were shocked but supportive, and Linda immediately suggested bringing Amy over to meet him. Amy was 8 years old, bright and energetic, with red hair in braids and a gap-toothed smile. She was not shy at all, marching right up to Charlie and announcing, "My name is Amy Fletcher and I'm in 3rd grade and I like science and reading and soccer. What do you like?" Charlie, overwhelmed by this burst of energy, managed to say, "I like drawing and soccer too." "Great," Amy declared. "We're going to be best friends. Come on, I'll show you the pool table. Uncle James taught me how to play last summer." And just like that, Charlie had his first real friend. They spent the afternoon playing games, drawing together, and talking. Amy did most of the talking at first, but gradually Charlie opened up, telling her about his dad and the things they used to do together. Amy listened without judgment, then said matter-of-factly, "My Uncle James is the best. He's going to take really good care of you." Watching from the doorway, James felt his heart swell. This was right. This was exactly where Charlie belonged. The pieces were falling into place in a way that felt almost divine, as if this whole situation had been orchestrated by something larger than himself. 2 weeks after Charlie's rescue, the preliminary hearing took place. Patricia was formally charged with first-degree child abuse, child abandonment, child neglect, and child endangerment. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Detective Morgan had interviewed neighbors from Charlie's old apartment building who testified about hearing Patricia scream at Charlie, seeing the boy looking increasingly thin and unkempt, and noticing Charlie was rarely allowed outside. The hospital had documented old bruises and evidence of malnutrition. Betty from the diner provided testimony about Charlie's condition the night James brought him in. James himself took the stand and described finding Charlie at the dump, alone and terrified. The judge ordered Patricia held without bail, pending trial, and Child Protective Services officially terminated her parental rights on an emergency basis. James chose not to bring Charlie to the courthouse, wanting to shield him from the trauma of seeing Patricia again. Carol Rodriguez, the social worker, kept James updated throughout the day. When James returned home that evening, Charlie was in the living room with Eleanor, working on a puzzle. "How did it go?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Patricia's parental rights have been terminated," James said. "She's going to trial, but that will take months. In the meantime, Charlie is officially free for adoption by qualified parents." Charlie looked up from the puzzle, processing this information. "Does that mean someone else will adopt me?" James came over and sat on the floor next to Charlie. "That depends. I've formally applied to adopt you, Charlie. If you want that. If you want to stay here permanently and be my son. But this is a decision you get to be part of. No one is going to force you into anything ever again." Charlie's eyes filled with tears. "You really want to adopt me? Like, for real? Forever?" "For real, forever," James confirmed. "I know we've only known each other for 2 weeks, but these have been the best 2 weeks of my life. You've brought something into this house that was missing. You've brought joy and purpose and life. If you'll have me, I'd be honored to be your dad." Charlie launched himself into James's arms, crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, yes, I want to stay with you. I want you to be my dad." Eleanor wiped her own tears as she watched the scene. This was what healing looked like, what redemption looked like. A child who had been discarded like garbage was being chosen, wanted, and loved. The news of Charlie's story had spread through Nashville's tight-knit community. Betty from the diner had told a few people, who had told others, and soon local media picked up the story. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in for Charlie's education fund. Local businesses offered to sponsor his needs. A youth soccer league reached out and offered him a free spot on their team once his ankle healed. Carol Rodriguez helped James navigate the adoption process. Given the termination of Patricia's parental rights, the lack of any other relatives, and Charlie's clear desire to be adopted by James, the process would be relatively straightforward. A home study would be conducted, character references would be gathered, and a final hearing would be held. Carol estimated it would take 3 to 4 months total. In the meantime, James enrolled Charlie in Hillsborough Elementary, a good public school near their home. He met with the principal and teachers, explained Charlie's situation, and asked them to be patient as Charlie adjusted. They were more than accommodating, assigning him to a classroom with a particularly nurturing teacher, Mrs. Sarah Thompson, who had experience working with children from difficult backgrounds. Charlie's first day of school was nerve-wracking. He had missed so much school in recent months that he was behind in several subjects. But Mrs. Thompson paired him with helpful classmates, including Amy, who was in the same grade, and assigned him a reading tutor to help him catch up. The community support continued to pour in. A local dentist offered free dental care. An optometrist provided a free eye exam and glasses. A children's clothing store donated a season's worth of outfits. The coach of the youth soccer league, Brian Anderson, came by the house to meet Charlie and assured him a spot was waiting whenever he was ready. "This is what Nashville does," Coach Anderson said to James. "We take care of our own. This boy is part of our community now, and we want to see him thrive." James was overwhelmed by the generosity. He had built his business on the principle of giving back to the community, supporting local charities and employing local people. Now the community was giving back to him and Charlie in ways he never could have imagined. Dr. Rebecca Walsh's office was comfortable and inviting, with soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and shelves full of books and toys. She specialized in childhood trauma and had been highly recommended by Carol Rodriguez. James brought Charlie to his first appointment on a Tuesday afternoon, and Charlie was understandably nervous. "Therapy doesn't mean there's something wrong with you," Dr. Walsh explained in their first session. "It just means you've been through difficult experiences, and I'm here to help you process those feelings in a healthy way." Charlie was hesitant at first, giving short answers and avoiding eye contact. But Dr. Walsh was patient and skilled, using art therapy to help Charlie express feelings he could not yet put into words. Over the following weeks, Charlie began to open up about his father's death, about how Patricia had changed afterward, about the fear and loneliness he had felt. "I thought it was my fault," Charlie admitted during one session. "I thought if I was better, if I was quieter and didn't make messes, she would like me. But no matter what I did, she still hated me." "That wasn't about you, Charlie," Dr. Walsh said gently. "Patricia's behavior was her choice. You were a child who needed care and love, and she failed to provide that. That failure is on her, not on you." These sessions were difficult but necessary. James would wait in the lobby, sometimes working on his laptop, sometimes just sitting and thinking about how much Charlie had been through. After each session, they would go get ice cream or hot chocolate, and Charlie would usually be a bit quieter than normal, processing what they had discussed. At home, James was discovering the joys and challenges of parenting. Charlie had nightmares sometimes, waking up crying and confused. James would go to his room, sit on the edge of his bed, and talk to him until he calmed down. Eleanor showed James how to braid Charlie's hair when it got longer, how to make school lunches that were both nutritious and appealing, how to read the signs when Charlie was overwhelmed and needed quiet time. James also learned about parent-teacher conferences, school projects, and the importance of establishing routines. Charlie thrived on structure, on knowing what to expect. They established morning routines, after-school routines, and bedtime routines. James would read. to Charlie every night before bed, working their way through classic children's books Charlie had never experienced. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when Charlie's ankle fully healed and he was cleared to play soccer. Coach Brian Anderson welcomed him to the team with open arms, and the other boys, including Amy's older brother Tyler, made sure Charlie felt included. The first time Charlie scored a goal during practice, James was there on the sidelines cheering, and Charlie's face lit up with pure joy. Did you see that? Charlie ran over after practice, still breathless with excitement. Did you see me score? I did, James said, pulling him into a hug. You were amazing. Your dad would have been so proud. Charlie's face grew thoughtful. Do you think he can see me? From heaven or wherever he is? James chose his words carefully. I think if there's any way for him to see you, he's watching. And I think he's glad you found someone to take care of you. I'm just the guy lucky enough to get to do it. The adoption process continued to move forward. James's home study was completed with glowing results. Character references came pouring in from business associates, friends, employees, and community members. Betty from the diner wrote a passionate letter about witnessing James's compassion the night he found Charlie. Eleanor provided a reference detailing how wonderful James was with Charlie and how the boy had blossomed under his care. Amy's parents, Grant and Linda Fletcher, also provided references. They talked about how James had changed since Charlie came into his life, how he seemed more grounded and purposeful. Linda wrote, James was always a good man, but becoming Charlie's father has brought out a depth of compassion and dedication I did not know existed. They are meant to be father and son. The court date for the final adoption hearing was set for December 15th, just over 3 months from the night James had found Charlie. As the date approached, Charlie's excitement grew. He drew pictures of their family, practiced writing Charlie Crawford over and over, and talked constantly about what their future would look like. Can we get a dog? Charlie asked one evening at dinner. James and Eleanor exchanged amused glances. Maybe, James said, after the adoption is finalized and we've settled into our routine. But yes, I think a dog would be a good addition to our family. And can I call you Dad? Charlie asked more tentatively. I mean, after it's official. James felt his throat tighten with emotion. Charlie, you can call me Dad right now if you want to. You don't have to wait for a piece of paper to make us family. We're already family where it counts, in our hearts. December 15th dawned cold but clear. James woke early, his stomach in knots despite knowing the outcome was all but certain. Carol Rodriguez had assured him that the adoption was just a formality at this point. All the requirements had been met, all the evaluations had been positive, and Charlie was thriving. Charlie bounced into James's room at 7, already dressed in the new suit Eleanor had helped him pick out for the occasion. Dad, he said, and James's heart swelled at the title. Are you ready? We need to leave soon. They had breakfast together, though neither ate much. Eleanor fussed over them both, straightening ties and smoothing hair. The car ride to the courthouse was quiet, both of them lost in their thoughts. James glanced over at Charlie and saw the boy's hands clasped tightly in his lap. Nervous? James asked. A little, Charlie admitted. What if something goes wrong? Nothing's going to go wrong, James assured him. Today is just the day we make official what's already true. You're my son, and I'm your dad, and no one can change that. The courthouse was bustling with activity. Carol met them in the hallway outside the family courtroom, along with James's lawyer, David Cohen. Also waiting were Betty from the diner, Eleanor, Grant, and Linda Fletcher with Amy and Tyler, Detective Susan Morgan, Dr. Rebecca Walsh, Coach Brian Anderson, and several of Charlie's teachers. Charlie's eyes went wide seeing so many people there to support him. They all came for me. Charlie whispered. They all care about you, James said. That's what family means, Charlie. Not just blood relations, but people who choose to be there for you. Judge Margaret Hendricks presided over the hearing. She was a woman in her 60s known for her fairness and her particular concern for children's welfare. She reviewed the case file carefully before looking up at James and Charlie with kind eyes. Mr. Crawford, Charlie, please approach the bench, Judge Hendricks said. They walked forward together, Charlie reaching for James's hand. The judge smiled at the gesture. I've read through all the materials in this case, Judge Hendricks began. I've reviewed the home study, the character references, the psychological evaluations, and the reports from Charlie's teachers and therapist. I want to hear from both of you before I make my ruling. Mr. Crawford, why do you want to adopt Charlie? James took a deep breath. Your Honor, the simple answer is that I love him. But the fuller answer is that Charlie has changed my life for the better. I was successful in business, but living alone in a big house without real purpose. The night I found Charlie at that dump, abandoned and afraid, something clicked into place for me. I realized that all the success in community. I'm not going to waste this second chance. I'm going to work hard and be good, and someday, when I'm older, I'm going to help other kids like me. I'm going to pay it forward. The room was silent for a moment, then Betty started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. Charlie ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. After the guests had left and the house was quiet, James tucked Charlie into bed. It was a routine they had established early on, one that both treasured. James sat on the edge of Charlie's bed, just as he did every night. This was a good day, Charlie said sleepily. The best, James agreed. But you know what? Tomorrow will be good too. And the day after that. Because we have each other now, and we have a whole community supporting us. You're never going to be alone again, Charlie. I promise you that. Dad. Charlie said, the words still new and wonderful on his tongue. I have an idea. Remember you said someday we might get a dog? I remember, James said with amusement. Well, I was thinking. There are probably other kids out there like me, who need help. And you have such a big house and a big heart. Maybe someday, when I'm older and things are settled, we could help another kid too. Like fostering or something. Because you saved my life, and maybe we could save someone else's. James felt his heart expand with pride and love. This child, who had been through so much, was already thinking about helping others. That's a beautiful idea, Charlie. And when the time is right, we'll absolutely talk about it. For now, though, let's just enjoy being us. Let's build our family strong, and then we can think about growing it. Okay, Dad, Charlie said, his eyes drifting closed. I love you. I love you too, son, James replied, his voice thick with emotion. So much. He turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching Charlie sleep peacefully. 3 months ago, this child had been abandoned at a dump. Now he was sleeping in a warm, safe bed in a home filled with love. Now he was James's son, Charlie Crawford, with a bright future ahead of him. James thought about the wrong turn that had brought him to Charlie that November night. It had not been a mistake at all. It had been fate, divine intervention, whatever you wanted to call it. It had been the universe bringing together two people who needed each other. The next morning, James woke to find Charlie already up, sitting at the kitchen table with Eleanor, working on a drawing. When Charlie saw James, he held it up proudly. It was a picture of their family. James, Charlie, Eleanor, and yes, a large dog, all standing in front of their house with the sun shining overhead. This is us, Charlie explained. This is our family. It's perfect, James said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. Over breakfast, James shared an idea he had been developing. Charlie, you know how you said you wanted to help other kids someday? Well, I've been thinking about starting a foundation. A non-profit organization dedicated to helping children who have been abandoned or abused. We could call it the Second Chances Foundation. It would provide support, resources, and advocacy for kids in situations like you are in. What do you think? Charlie's eyes lit up. Really? That would be amazing. Could I help? Of course, James said. You'll be my consultant. You understand what these kids need better than anyone. When can we start? Charlie asked eagerly. How about today? James suggested. We'll spend the morning drawing up plans, and then this afternoon we have your soccer game. Tomorrow we'll meet with lawyers to set up the foundation properly. Sound good? Sounds perfect, Charlie agreed. As they worked together that morning, sketching out ideas for the foundation, James reflected on how much his life had changed. 3 months ago, he had been a successful but somewhat lonely businessman, living in a big house by himself, focused primarily on profits and expansion. Now he was a father, building a foundation to help vulnerable children, surrounded by love and purpose. Charlie had changed too. The frightened, thin boy who had been abandoned at a dump had become a confident, healthy child who laughed easily and dreamed big dreams. He was excelling in school, thriving in soccer, and making friends. More importantly, he was learning to trust again, to believe he was worthy of love and care. That afternoon at Charlie's soccer game, James stood on the sidelines with the other parents, cheering as Charlie scored 2 goals. Betty had come to watch, as had Amy and her family. After the game, they all went out for pizza, a rowdy, joyful group celebrating ordinary life, which felt extraordinary after everything they had been through. As the weeks passed, the Second Chances Foundation took shape. James hired a director, assembled a board, and began reaching out to children's services agencies. Charlie participated in planning sessions, offering insights about what would have helped him during his darkest days. The foundation would provide emergency clothing and supplies, connect children with therapeutic services, support foster families, and advocate for policy changes to protect vulnerable children. 6 months after the adoption, the Second Chances Foundation held its official launch event. Media coverage was extensive. Charlie, now 8 years old and thriving, spoke briefly about his experience and about the importance of community support for abandoned children. He did not share graphic details but spoke honestly about being scared and alone, and about how kindness from strangers had saved his life. If you see someone who needs help, Charlie told the audience, do not walk away. That person could be like me. They could need just one person to care. And if you are that person, you could change their whole life. The foundation received over $500,000 in donations at the launch event alone. More importantly, they received commitments from dozens of volunteers and several corporate sponsors. James's restaurant group committed to donating a percentage of profits annually. Betty's Diner became an official partner, offering free meals to foster families. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. James and Charlie developed their own traditions. Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon movie marathons, Wednesday evening soccer practice. Eleanor became less of a housekeeper and more of a beloved grandmother figure. The Fletchers were like extended family, with frequent dinners and holiday celebrations together. Charlie continued his therapy with Dr. Walsh, working through his trauma at a healthy pace. He still had occasional nightmares, but they were less frequent. He talked openly about his father now, keeping his memory alive through stories and drawings. He had forgiven Patricia, in his own way, understanding that her failures were not his fault. 2 years after the adoption, on Charlie's 10th birthday, James surprised him with a Labrador puppy they named Scout. Charlie was overjoyed, immediately taking on the responsibilities of pet ownership with enthusiasm. Scout became another member of their family, greeting them at the door each day and sleeping at the foot of Charlie's bed each night. The Second Chances Foundation continued to grow, helping hundreds of children in its first 2 years. They established an emergency response team that could be called when children were found in crisis situations. They funded counseling services and educational support. They created a mentorship program matching volunteers with foster children. And Charlie remained involved, speaking at fundraisers and spending time with younger children who were going through experiences similar to what he had endured. One evening, 3 years after the adoption, James and 13-year-old Charlie were sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset. Charlie had grown tall and strong, was doing well in school, and had become a star player on his soccer team. But more than his achievements, James was proud of the young man Charlie was becoming, kind, thoughtful, and committed to helping others. "Dad," Charlie said, "do you ever think about that night at the dump?" "Sometimes," James admitted. "Why?" "I think about it too," Charlie said. "And I know it sounds weird, but I'm kind of grateful for it. Not for what Patricia did, but for what came after. If that hadn't happened, we might never have found each other. You saved me that night, but being your son has saved me every day since." James put his arm around Charlie's shoulders. "You saved me too, you know. I did not realize how empty my life was until you filled it with joy and purpose. We saved each other, Charlie. That is what family does." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn orange and pink, then purple and blue. In the distance, Scout barked playfully in the yard. From inside the house came the sounds of Eleanor preparing dinner. Somewhere in the city, The Second Chances Foundation was helping another child in crisis, offering hope where there had been despair. James thought about the wrong turn that had led him to Charlie, about all the small kindnesses that had added up to a miracle. He thought about Betty offering free food, about Eleanor opening her heart, about Detective Morgan working tirelessly for justice, about Carol expediting the foster placement, about Dr. Walsh guiding their healing, about an entire community rallying around one small boy. He thought about how one act of stopping to help, one decision to not look away, had changed two lives completely. And he thought about all the other children out there who needed someone to stop, to notice, to care. "Come on," James said, standing and offering Charlie his hand. "Eleanor's making your favorite dinner, and then we need to finish your homework before the foundation board meeting tomorrow. Can I present my idea for the summer camp program?" Charlie asked eagerly. "Absolutely," James confirmed. "You are the heart of that foundation, Charlie. Your voice matters." They walked into the house together, father and son, their hands clasped, their futures bright. From a dump to a mansion, from abandonment to adoption, from despair to hope, their journey had been miraculous. But the real miracle was not in the dramatic rescue or the fairy tale adoption. The real miracle was in the daily choice to show up for each other, to be family, to love without conditions or limitations. And that was a miracle that would last a lifetime and beyond, touching not just their lives but the lives of countless children who would benefit from the Second Chances Foundation, all because one man made a wrong turn on a November night and chose to stop and help a child in need.